Imagine this. Your boss just called you out in front of the entire team. Your face is burning. Your jaw is tight. Every nerve in your body is screaming at you to fire back, to defend yourself, to make them regret it. But you don't. You sit there, still, breathing, and you do the one thing that terrifies everyone in that room. You say nothing. You let the silence stretch until it becomes unbearable for everyone except you. And in that moment, something shifts. The room doesn't see weakness. The room sees someone they cannot reach, someone they cannot break. Most people will never understand what just happened. They think silence means you had nothing to say. They think walking away means losing. They spend their entire lives reacting, defending, explaining, and every unnecessary word they speak chips away at something they can never rebuild. Their credibility, their peace, their power. They give themselves away one sentence at a time, and they don't even realize the damage until it's done. But over 2,000 years ago, a group of philosophers discovered something about silence that the modern world has completely forgotten. They didn't just practice quiet. They mastered it as a discipline, as a way of building unshakable inner strength. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, Musonius Rufus. These men understood that silence is not the absence of power. It is the purest expression of it. Today we're going deep into 5 Stoic laws of silence. Not 8, not 12, 5, because depth defeats breadth every time. And each of these laws will fundamentally change the way you speak, the way you listen, and the way the world responds to you. These aren't communication tips from some self-help book. These are principles forged by emperors, prisoners, and exiles who survived the harshest conditions in human history without wasting a single word. If this channel brings you value, there's one thing I'll ask. Subscribe. It's free. It takes 1 second. And don't skip any of the 5 laws, because the one that rewires everything might be the one you almost missed. Let's begin. Law number 1. Speak only when your words are more beautiful than the silence. Musonius Rufus was called the Roman Socrates. He was exiled by Emperor Nero, stripped of everything, sent to the barren island of Gyros where prisoners went to be forgotten. And in that exile, while lesser men would have raged against their fate, Musonius did something remarkable. He spoke less than he ever had in his life. He taught the few people around him not through long lectures, but through short, precise sentences followed by long stretches of silence. His students later wrote that they learned more from what Musonius did not say than from what he did. He taught that we should speak only when our words serve a clear purpose, not to impress, not to fill the air, not to soothe our own discomfort with quiet. His teaching was simple. If your words do not improve upon silence, then keep silent. Now think about this honestly. How many words did you speak yesterday that actually needed to be said? Not polite noise, not filler, not opinions nobody asked for. Words that genuinely moved something forward. If you're honest, the number is probably smaller than you think. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, put it perfectly. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. That's not a clever saying. That's architecture. You were literally designed to absorb more than you express. The moment you honor that design, everything shifts. Here's your practice. For the next 24 hours before you speak anything, pause for 3 seconds. 3 seconds. That's all. In that gap, ask yourself, does this need to be said by me right now? You will be stunned by how many words you were about to waste. And in that silence, you'll find something you haven't felt in a long time. Control. But control over your words is only the beginning. Because law number 2 is where most people get silence completely wrong. And the cost of getting it wrong can follow you for years. Law number 2. Your silence after provocation is the loudest thing you will ever say. Let me tell you about a man named James. He was a project manager at a tech company. Talented, respected by his team. And one afternoon in a meeting, his colleague publicly accused him of stealing credit for a joint project. The accusation was false. James knew it. Everyone in the room probably knew it. His face went red. His hands were shaking under the table. And everything inside him screamed to destroy this man's argument with facts and fury. James fired back. He raised his voice. He listed every contribution. He called his colleague dishonest in front of everyone. And he was right about all of it. But it didn't matter, because what everyone remembered was not the truth. They remembered the outburst. 2 months later, James was passed over for a promotion. The reason his manager gave was temperament concerns. One reaction, one moment of lost control, and the truth became irrelevant. Now compare that with what Epictetus taught. He was born a slave, mocked, beaten, dismissed by men with a fraction of his mind. And he said any person capable of angering you becomes your master. He only has power over you if you allow yourself to be disturbed by him. Let that sink in. The person who provokes you only wins when you respond. Your silence is not surrender. Your silence is the loudest declaration that they are simply not worth your energy. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal from generals and hostility from senators he had helped with his own hands. His response was always the same. Focus inward. Let the noise pass. He wrote, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Not to out-argue, not to out-insult, but to be so far above the provocation that it cannot reach you. That's not just a quote. That's a weapon for your peace of mind. This isn't about becoming a doormat. This isn't about letting people walk over you. It's about choosing which battles deserve your energy and which ones are just traps disguised as confrontations. The person who stays silent when provoked doesn't lose the fight. They refuse to enter one that was never worth fighting. Here's the question you need to sit with. How many arguments have you won that actually cost you something more valuable than the victory? A relationship, a reputation, your own peace. Here's your practice. The next time someone provokes you, count to 10 before you say a single word. In that space, ask yourself one thing. Will this matter in 5 years? If the answer is no, then your silence just saved you from a wound that words would have opened. Drop this in the comments right now. My silence is not weakness. It is my greatest strength. If you believe that, type it below. Now here's where most silence advice gets dangerous. Because there is a version of silence that can destroy you from the inside. And if you don't understand the next law, you might already be practicing it without knowing. Law number 3, guard your inner world, but never use silence to hide from yourself. This is the law where I need to be completely honest with you, because most videos about silence will tell you to be quiet, to guard your peace, to stop sharing your problems. And that's true. But they leave out the part that matters most. There is a line between disciplined silence and toxic avoidance. And crossing that line can break you faster than any loud argument ever could. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But here's the part most people miss. Having power over your mind means confronting what's in it, not hiding from it, not numbing it with quiet, not pretending the pain doesn't exist because you refuse to speak about it. When something painful happens and you immediately tell 10 people about it, you relive the pain 10 times. Every retelling reopens the wound. Every conversation gives it fresh oxygen. What could have been a small fire becomes an inferno that defines your entire week. The Stoics understood this. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And every time you broadcast your suffering to people who cannot help you, add imagination to reality. But, and this is critical, there is a difference between not telling everyone and not telling anyone. Silence becomes toxic the moment it turns into suppression. The moment you use quiet not as discipline, but as a wall between you and your own emotions. The Stoics never taught emotional numbness. They taught emotional mastery. They sat with their pain. They examined it with reason. They wrote about it privately. Marcus Aurelius filled pages of his journal processing grief and frustration and doubt. That is not the silence of avoidance. That is the silence of a man doing the hardest work there is, the work of understanding himself. So here is the rule. Share your struggles with people who can actually help. One person, maybe two, not your entire circle, not every acquaintance. Choose silence as your default with the world, but never choose silence as your default with yourself. That's not discipline. That's a prison you built with your own hands. This isn't about shutting people out. It's about choosing who gets in. That is sovereignty over your own narrative. If you've made it this far, I need you to know something. You are not like most people. Most viewers left minutes ago. They went back to their feeds, back to the noise. But you're still here, in the silence, learning what most will never learn. And what comes next is the law that separates those who understand silence from those who have truly mastered it. Stay with me. Law number 4. Let time speak what words never could. In 2009, NYU psychologist Peter Gallwitzer ran a study that changed how we think about goals and silence. He split participants into 2 groups. Group A wrote down their goals and announced them to a room full of people. Group B wrote down the same goals and told no one. For weeks later, Group A had made almost no progress. Group B had made twice as much. Gallwitzer called it the substitution effect. Your brain treats the announcement as the achievement. The moment you tell everyone what you're going to do, your mind says, "Good, we did it." And the fire goes out before the work begins. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years before the research confirmed it. They didn't announce their virtues. They practiced them, quietly, consistently, without applause. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time talking about what a good man should be like. Simply be one." He didn't say prove you're one. He didn't say convince others. He said be one. And being requires no audience, no defense, no speech, just the quiet daily commitment to showing up as the person you've decided to become. Now let me give you the other side of this, a real failure story. In 2015, Elizabeth Holmes was the youngest self-made female billionaire. She talked constantly about changing the world, She was on every magazine cover. She spoke at every conference. She announced revolutionary blood testing technology that would save millions of lives. The world applauded. But behind the curtain, there was nothing. The technology didn't work. And when the silence finally came, it wasn't by choice. It was forced upon her in a courtroom. Meanwhile, consider Abraham Lincoln. When the country was tearing itself apart over slavery, Lincoln was pressured from every direction to declare his position publicly. Abolitionists demanded he speak. Opponents taunted him. Newspapers mocked his silence. And Lincoln said nothing. For months, he worked in quiet. He drafted the Emancipation Proclamation in silence. And when he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of a man who had done the thinking before the talking. His silence didn't make him look weak. His silence made his words historic. Here's the brutal truth. The people who talk the most about what they're going to do are usually the ones who do the least. And the people who say nothing and show up with results are the ones who change the course of history. Here's your practice. The next time you achieve something or set a major goal, resist every urge to announce it. Give it 30 days of silent work first. Let the results speak. Let people wonder what you've been working on. That patience is power most people will never understand. Type this in the comments if you feel it. I let my results speak for me. My silence is my strategy. Now, the final law. This is the one I saved for last because it contains everything. And if you only remember one thing from this entire video, make it this. Law number 5. Master your tongue and you master your fate. Seneca was one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in Rome, advisor to an emperor, a philosopher whose words reached millions even in the ancient world. And when Emperor Nero turned on him and ordered his death, Seneca didn't beg. He didn't argue. He didn't curse the man who betrayed him. He gathered his closest friends. He spoke calmly, briefly. He said a few words about how to live well. And then he opened his veins and met death with the same discipline he had practiced every day of his life. The men in the room wept. Seneca did not. His final silence said more than any farewell speech ever could. That is the ultimate expression of this law. The mastery of your tongue is not just about daily conversations. It's about who you become when everything is at stake, when your world is falling apart, when every emotion screams at you to react. That is the moment that reveals whether your silence was practiced or performed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. Every word you speak is purchased with the most expensive currency in the universe. Time you will never get back. Breath you will never take again. So the question isn't whether to speak. The question is whether what you're about to say is worth the cost. Seneca reinforced this when he wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And there is no greater waste than words spent in anger, words spent in gossip, words spent defending yourself to people who were never going to understand you anyway." But here is what separates self-mastery from manipulation, and I want to be clear about this. Everything I've shared today is about you, about your inner world, about your peace, about your discipline. This is not about controlling others through silence. This is not about punishment or power games. The Stoics never taught silence as a weapon against other people. They taught it as a shield for your own mind. The moment you use silence to punish or manipulate someone, you've abandoned everything these philosophers stood for. True mastery of the tongue comes from a place of strength, not strategy, not domination, strength. Cleanthes, the second head of the Stoic school after Zeno, worked as a water carrier by night so he could study philosophy by day. He was mocked for his poverty, mocked for his slow mind, and when asked why he endured it all in silence, he said the same way the earth endures, by being too solid to be moved. That kind of strength doesn't need words. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't even need to be understood. The undisciplined tongue has started wars, destroyed marriages, ended friendships, ruined careers, not because the words were powerful, but because the speaker was weak in the moment, reactive, impulsive, unable to hold the silence that would have saved everything. But the disciplined tongue, the tongue that speaks only with intention, only with purpose, only when the silence has been honored first, that tongue builds empires. That tongue heals wounds. That tongue commands rooms without ever raising its volume. The goal isn't to become silent. The goal is to become deliberately silent, to choose every word like it costs you something, because it does. Now let me leave you with this. And I almost didn't include it because it felt too personal to the philosophy, but it's the image that stays with me. When Marcus Aurelius lay dying in his military camp at Vindobona, he was the most powerful man alive. Plague-ridden, exhausted from years of war, betrayed by people he had trusted with his empire. His generals gathered around him waiting for final orders, waiting for a grand speech, some last imperial decree, and Marcus gave them almost nothing. He pointed toward the sunrise and whispered to his son, "Go to the rising sun." Then, according to the ancient accounts, he pulled his cloak over his head and turned to face the wall. And the most powerful emperor the world had ever known died in silence, because he had already said everything that mattered in the way he lived. The words were done. The silence was his final lesson. From this moment forward, you are not the person who reacts. You are not the person who explains. You are not the person who fills every room with noise to prove they belong in it. You are the person who lets the silence do the work, and that person is unshakable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." 2,000 years later, that truth hasn't aged a single day, and your silence is where that power begins. If this video lit something inside you, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And watch the video appearing on screen right now to keep building that unbreakable Stoic mind. Thank you for being part of Stoic Citadel. Guard your words. Honor your silence. And remember that the most dangerous person in any room is the one who has mastered the art of saying absolutely nothing.